This is my take from podcast. If you want to listen summary of podcast, start with a free trial for detailed summaries on Apple Podcasts and Spotify using link in descriptions and support with tips on Patreon. Here is key point discussed in podcast Louis Tomlinson. The room was cold that day. When the police knocked. No. I just knew. You know, it's crazy to think about how tiny changes in our habits can completely alter the trajectory of our lives. And it's the same with our habits. A slight change in our daily routines can guide our lives to a very different destination. The thing is, we often think that massive success requires massive action, but it's actually the tiny improvements that add up over time. Just a one improvement every day can compound to nearly 38 times better over the course of a year. And on the flip side, a one decline every day can bring you close to zero. It's the small, consistent changes we make every day that ultimately lead to big results. In fact, James Clear calls the early stages of progress the valley of disappointment because it's hard to see any results at first. But that's exactly where the magic happens. He didn't give up, even when he faced rejection and disappointment. He kept pushing forward, and eventually he found success. But it wasn't just about the success, it was about the journey, the growth, and the lessons he learned along the way. You know, Louis talks about how he grew up in a working-class town, and how he had to work hard to get where he is today. We all have our own struggles and challenges, but it's how we respond to them that matters. He says that his mom was always there for him, encouraging him to pursue his dreams, even when he faced rejection. It's about the music, the passion, and the connection with others. You know, Louis talks about how he felt isolated and alienated by the fame and the lifestyle that came with it. We all feel isolated and disconnected at times, even when we're surrounded by people. And for Louis, it's the music, the creativity, and the connection with others. You know, it's funny, when you're living a life like Louis Tomlinson's, where you're catapulted to fame at a young age, it's hard to keep things in perspective. He talks about how, when he was in one direction, he felt like he was just going with the flow, and everything was just happening so fast. But when the band broke up, it was like hitting a brick wall. He says it was like grieving, and he wasn't prepared for it. He thought they were just going to take a hiatus, but deep down, he knew it was over. And it's interesting, because he talks about how when you're in a band, you can share the load, you know, the good and the bad. But when you're on your own, it's all on you. He says it's like, you're not just grieving the band, you're grieving the loss of that camaraderie, that sense of security. And it's hard to adjust to being on your own, especially when you're used to having 4 other guys to lean on. But what's really striking is how he talks about the impact of fame on his relationships, especially with his family. He says it was hard for his mom because she felt like she was losing him and she didn't have time to grieve the loss of having him around. And he talks about how he wasn't present enough, how he wasn't aware of the impact his success was having on the people around him. It's a really honest and vulnerable conversation, and it's clear that he's still unpacking a lot of those emotions. And it's not just about the relationships, it's about the sense of identity too. He talks about how, when you're in a band, you're part of something bigger than yourself. And when that's gone, it's hard to figure out who you are on your own. He says it's like you're looking behind the curtain, and you're seeing all the things that you used to take for granted, and it's hard to adjust to not having those things anymore. But despite all the challenges, he's still making music, and he's still pushing himself to be creative. He says it's hard work, but it's worth it, because he's doing what he loves. And it's clear that he's still got a lot to give, and he's not done yet. You know, it's interesting. When you're talking about the trajectory of your life, tiny changes in your habits can completely alter the course of where you're headed. And that's what happens with our habits. They can either compound for us or against us. But on the flip side, one worse every day for a year, and you're close to zero. It's crazy how these tiny changes can add up. And it's not just about the numbers, it's about the fulfillment, the knowledge, the productivity, the skills, and the relationships you build along the way. Success is really the product of daily habits, not some on-sign a lifetime transformation. Now, when you start something new, you expect to see linear progress, but that's not always the case. There's this valley of disappointment where you're putting in all this effort, but you're not seeing the results you want, and that's where it's easy to get discouraged. But the thing is, those small changes, they're still working, even if you can't see them yet. It's like Louis Tomlinson said, he was talking about how he does a cover of a One Direction song, and he calls it a cover, which is ironic because it's his own song. But he was saying how he remembers singing it at Wembley Stadium, and then he's singing it at a smaller venue. And it's just a completely different experience. And that's what happens when you're comparing your current situation to something that's not realistic. You know, it's like Stephen Bartlett said, we all compare ourselves to others, it's how we understand the value of things. But sometimes you have to use a different yardstick of measurement. You have to find a way to measure your own success in a different way. And that's what Louis Tomlinson was trying to do. He was trying to find a way to measure his own success outside of the lens of One Direction. And that's what's so powerful about tiny changes in your habits, they can completely alter the course of your life. So, it's worth taking the time to think about what habits you want to build, what habits you want to break, and how you can make those tiny changes that will add up to make a big difference in the long run. And it's the same with our habits. Those small, almost imperceptible changes can add up to make a huge difference over time. We often think that we need to make some massive, monumental shift, but really, it's the small, consistent changes that can lead to the biggest transformations. It's not about making some huge, dramatic change. It's about showing up every day and putting in the work. We can make a big impact by making small, consistent changes in how we show up for the people around us. But what's really powerful about Louis' conversation is how he talks about the importance of empathy and understanding. He says that we need to give people a little more thought and not just judge them on the surface level. You know, it's amazing how tiny changes in our habits can completely alter the trajectory of our lives. Just like how a slight adjustment in the direction of a plane can make all the difference in its destination. It's the same with our habits. A one improvement every day can compound to nearly 38 times better over a year. But on the flip side, a one decline every day can bring us close to zero. It's all about the power of compounding, and how our habits can either work for us or against us. It's not about making some massive leap or achieving some monumental success, but rather about making small, incremental changes that add up over time. And it's not just about the big things, but also the small, everyday habits that can make a huge difference in our lives. Take, for example, the idea of posting every single day on social media. It may seem like a small thing, but it can have a profound impact on our lives. Not only can it help us learn faster and build a following, but it can also help us develop a sense of discipline and consistency. But here's the thing, progress is rarely linear. We often expect to see immediate results, but the truth is that progress is often slow and incremental. James Clear calls this the valley of disappointment, where we put in a lot of effort but don't see much progress. But the key is to keep going, to keep pushing forward even when it feels like we're not making progress. Because the truth is, every small step we take gets us closer to our goals, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. He's been through so much, but he's still pushing forward, still creating, still sharing his music with the world. And it's not just about the music itself, but about the journey, the process of creating and sharing it. He's learned to prioritize his time, to focus on what's truly important, and to cultivate a sense of gratitude and appreciation for the little things in life. It's not about achieving some kind of monumental success, but about making small, incremental changes that add up over time. It's about cultivating a sense of discipline and consistency, and about focusing on what truly matters. So let's take a page out of Louis Tomlinson's book and start making those small changes today. Who knows where they'll take us?